Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with a speculation video. It's actually been quite a while, but you know, things have been quiet lately and yeah, I haven't really been too inspired until recent dates. So as you can tell from this video, we're going to talk about Norsca and what I want to see from a Norsca rework, taking into account the stuff that we've seen in Warhammer 3, how the monogods have been implemented and so on. And while yes, it does make sense to talk about the Warriors of Chaos, I've already done a little series on what I want from a Warriors of Chaos rework, so it only makes sense to go for Norsca, because Norsca better be the next rework after Warriors of Chaos. Please, Creative Assembly, I'm begging you. But before anything, I want to start off with a bit of a theory. So as we know, Norsca wasn't really implemented too well. It was decently fun in Warhammer 1, where the map was quite small, but Warhammer 2 made things, well, a little bit more complicated, and the race isn't really fun to play. Even with mods, it's even quite hard to find decent mods for Norsca. The interesting thing, of course, is that Norsca is a Warhammer 2 race, not a Warhammer 1 race, and it's strange that it wasn't, well, good, considering that not long after Warhammer 2's release we had the Rise of the Tomb Kings, and well, that was just incredible, wasn't it? It's one of the best DLCs that ever been released. So the current theory I have why Norsca is so boring is mostly because, well, Norsca didn't have an army book. And yes, a lot of people would say, well, Kislev and Cathay don't. Yes, but they do for Old World. I think there was never really an intention for Old World to have Norsca, and this is what happened. They just wanted to make something fun. Because let's be honest, if we can compare Kislev from 6th to Kislev from nowadays, you know, it is very different but very much the same, but it's got all the stuff that makes it so interesting, whereas Norsca is legit just downgraded Warriors of Chaos. So I don't really blame Creative Assembly for the lackluster DLC because, well, there was just no proper source material. Everything else is just pretty much Warriors of Chaos. In fact, most of the stuff for Norsca is a Warriors of Chaos unit. So with all that being said, what do I want to see from a Norsca rework? Well, we already know at this point that they can't really have any walls. This is something that we know from Warhammer 3. And I think this pretty much means that because they had that stipulation already there, that they've already got more or less some sort of plans, which is a bit of a shame. I really do hope that they kind of revert that, and some important areas do end up having walls, because Norsca is not a barren wasteland. In fact, there are a lot of fortresses, there are like elven areas that have been abandoned and taken over, and the Norscans themselves have built up settlements and forts, and I hope that gets represented properly. Don't get me wrong, I like how all the minor settlement battles are being done now, and even the ones that we faced inside of Norsca aren't too bad, but some variety, having some walls to defend and all that would just be kind of cool, and I just really hope that we get more of Norsca is a civilization that's got their own culture, and it's not just a bunch of monkey barbarians. Now, I'm not too sure if the AI is able to do this in Warhammer 3, as, well, the Norscan factions always get wiped out quite early, but having Norsca being able to take over any settlement would be good, mainly because, well, it makes no sense that they only take, say, for example, the big cities, all the capitals and that, and obviously anything with a port. Yeah, I get the idea that they wanted to do that for Warhammer 1, and Warhammer 1 that worked out really well, but we're getting bigger and bigger maps. Just in the Mortal Empires, the Warhammer 2 one, it was already way too much. There wasn't really a lot of areas that they could take, and, well, we've seen the data mine map. We know it's massive for the Immortal Empires. It's going to be a bit of a hassle, especially going to Cathay or the Docklands and, you know, all those areas. Yes, there's a decent amount of ports, but being able to empire build with Norsca makes sense, as we do know this is something from lore that prior to the whole founding of Kislev and the empire proper and so on, they did rule all those territories too. So we know they can actually control land. Mechanically, I like the stuff that they already have as a plain thing, you know, dedicating to Chaos Gods and all that. I do hope that we get like a 5th tree though, so rather than just dedicating to Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch or Sinesh, you can decide to go undivided, like true Norsca in a sense. It's still not true Norsca because not all Norscans are Chaos worshippers, but you get what I mean. Having an undivided route would be kind of interesting. With that being said, maybe if you dedicate, when you go in the standard route, so if you dedicate to a specific god, you could get access to maybe some bloodletters and then a greater demon, which I think would be kind of cool. But then undivided, you could get access to maybe just the basic bloodletters, plague bearers, demonettes, you know, but in a cap sense, I don't know, or maybe in a reinforcement mechanic way, just like you'd get with a Huntsmaster. So you'd get reinforcements, and that would give you, say, a few ones that you can use to summon in, or a few Plague Bearers, a few Demonettes, depending on randomly generated events. Or better yet said, RNG, but give them a little bit of chaos. If they're going to be shoehorned directly into chaos, which is more or less what Bread of Assembly have done, sorry about the cut, but the cat just decided to slap into the microphone. We don't know if that was under direction from Games Workshop, because they do kind of call the shots for these types of things. It would just be nice to be able to have a fifth option so we don't have to dedicate, because a lot of us don't want to dedicate to a god. Maybe we just want to have fun as vanilla-style warriors. Well, marauders. Fake Vikings? I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually describe Norsca from a lore-friendly point of view. Something which is very specific is the fact that Wulfric needs to become a Pseudo Horde. This is something that I've been saying for many, many years. And I know that a lot of the community thinks the same way. Like, at this point, it's just like the Vampire Coast, and it just has to be Wulfric, but he's the Wanderer, so let him actually be a Wanderer. I very much doubt that they're going to give him a special flying mount to represent his ship, which is a bit of a shame. So if we could just have it as a Pseudo Horde, that would work out really, really well, and you could have a lot of fun with it. Maybe if they had an element of choice to where you could start too, which is doable with mods, but I know it can be a bit finicky, so I'm not sure if the devs would be thinking, yeah, let's do this. But Pseudo Horde is very, very possible. We've seen that already with loads of different factions. Obviously, this came to be with the Vampire Coast, but we've seen it with all the different rogue armies, so it's still very possible. Frog could be done in a really interesting way, just to allow to recruit some other monster units from different factions to give him the whole King of the Monsters vibe, which I think that's pretty much all he really needs. A little bit of rework with the voice acting would be interesting, mostly because, well, what we get in Total War isn't what Frog is in actual Warhammer Fantasy. However, this has been addressed in a dev interview with Akkad and Rich Aldridge, I believe, so you never know, It would still be kind of cool, and I'm kind of hoping for it in the future. Now, as for something new in terms of mechanics, well, I've had this idea for a while, and let's see what you guys think. Taking inspiration from the Greenskin war mechanic where you put a war target out, this would be something very similar where you put a target, you go and destroy it, and you get a lot of income, because we know that, well, you know, Norsca doesn't really have a good economy, so you'd have to go to a place and do some damage, just raise the settlement, and you'd get a big boost of money coming in for maybe a turn, a one-off, or maybe just an increase overall, which would give you reason to go for faraway targets. So obviously it would work like the war. The closer that it is, the less of a bonus, but the further it is, the better the bonus. So if you're a Norsca, you go and do a raid, a Norscan raid, we'll call it, going to Lustria, going to Cafe, you know, something that's really far away to get some really good bonuses. I think something like that would work quite well because it would give you reason to explore, and that's really what we want from these types of games, don't we? Especially if we're playing as Norsca and we're going to be dealing with a massive world. Well, why not give me a reason to go to Cafe? Why not give me a reason to go to Lustria? And it's simple enough because they've already got more or less the idea and source code from the war mechanic. It just needs a little bit of change of paint, and that's pretty much it. And if it works out quite well, maybe a Bretonnian Crusade mechanic could be done in a very similar way. I think buildings will need to be reworked a little bit. In the case of anything that fixes stuff faction-wide and all that, that's fine, because I think the bonuses overall are good, but you know, with these things, we're likely to get DLC alongside a rework, and let's be honest, the Norsca roster is actually not too bad. It's actually fairly large, but everything's too scrunched up, and if more stuff ends up appearing, well, it's going to have to be spread out a little bit, and yeah, it just kind of makes sense. Maybe a few better economy buildings. They don't have to be like proper economy, but just some certain effects would be nice. And lastly, the tech tree definitely needs some help. Really, it's fine for what it is, but as more races and factions get added in, we know how it's going to work, where it just needs to branch out more and more, and it's starting to look a little bit ugly. There's a lot of reasons why just to focus that section and not anything else, well, at least until later. It just needs to be split out a bit better, just a bit more easier on the eyes, a bit more streamlined. The good thing about every other race is that they have tech trees which are really nice looking and they're just really easy to understand, whereas the Norsca one is just scroll through and just try and find stuff. So if it's divided into, say, for example, Old World, New World, and East World, well, I don't know if they'll call it East World, but maybe divided by continent, probably even better. So you'd have the usual stuff which would focus on your troops, and obviously the Monster Hunter stuff. Monster Hunters should remain because the monster hunts are really fun. But then for the racial bonus, have it divided into sections. So Southlands, then obviously Old World, obviously Lustria or New World if it's just that easier, because obviously it's just a few races in the New World. And I think that'll just be a bit easier. Really, there's not much else to talk about. Norsca as a framework is kind of fine. It just needs a little bit of a touch-up, and that's it. And obviously some quality of life changes just to make it better. But able to control more territories, and then just a few fixes here and there to already existing mechanics, and obviously their tech tree, and they should be fine. One fear I do have, and this is kind of going into DLC section, but I don't really want to stay on DLC too much, is obviously we need more units. I do hope that Games Workshop have taken into account that Norsca was actually kind of well received in Warhammer 1, and people do have hope for Norsca in Warhammer 3, so maybe an army book in the future, which is very much possible, especially since the Norskins, funny enough, got some love in Blood Bowl recently, so that would be able to get more units in, some more monsters, just general stuff. The only other thing I'd like to comment about, which technically could land on the rework because we could get it as an FLC instead of as the DLC, but I imagine obviously a Norscan DLC, is more diverse start positions. One thing I don't want the Norskins to feel is shoehorned into Norsca. One thing I always said is, oh, it would be great if Norsca got renamed to Tribes of the North and added in the Kurgan and all the other different sub-factions just to be able to have different things. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, mainly because Games Workshop won't want to dilute that type of stuff, and they'll want to keep all the different cultures as a open thing to be able to work on them in Old World should the need arise. So stuff like that would not happen with Total War Warhammer because of how Games Workshop are in a very finicky sense. So either way, we do know that there are some Norskans which do form towns and cities and so on outside of Norsca. Skeggi is a very important one here. Obviously, I don't want something in Skeggi because, you know, Mazdamundi is so close, but, you know, that means that we could have something potentially in Cathay as a start position because, you know, these are Norscan raiders, so they could be attacking Cathay, or even in Ind and Koresh should that area ever be opened up. But it would be nice to have Norskins out of Norsca. This is why I said that obviously Wulfric should be a proper wanderer. It's just the idea of having something different and not everyone starting in the same territory, which is so small as it stands, and it's likely that the Demon Prince is going to start there anyway because he takes over Doom Keep, doesn't he, in the, well, new canon for Warhammer 3. So having a few diverse starts would be fun because that leads to more replayability. That's what I enjoy. That's honestly what I enjoy the most. Being able to start off as obviously the Hunts Marshal in Lustria is quite fun, or, you know, we've got all the Skaven in so many different locations, it allows me to play Skaven again and have a lot of fun. Like I've said time and time again, I think the idea of Norsca is good, and a lot of the stuff that was implemented with them is good. The only problem is that the execution wasn't great. But I think just a few changes here and there, that will be perfect enough to just fix everything up. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion.